So today's talk is part of our lecture series, Conversations in Forest History. Our guest today is Marybeth Lorbiecki. She is the author of the award-winning biography, A Fierce Green Fire, Aldo Leopold's Life and Legacy, and many other books. Now, one of the reasons why I asked Marybeth to join us is she's not only writing books for adults, but for children as well. And she's got just a wonderful array of book topics for children and adults. And I strongly encourage you to visit her website to learn more about all of her many publications. Today, she's going to be talking about one of her children's books. It's called Lucette. And she has the unique opportunity, actually she's immersed in it now, where she is turning that into a musical. And she's going to talk about that as part of her larger topic or larger discussion. She's an adjunct writing and literature professor at the University of Wisconsin at River Falls. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Marybeth.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. First, I want to say I haven't known a lot about the Forest History Society. And so now I have to give after I get off of this, because I think it's really important work to preserve forest history and conservation and how they go together. And that's really what my topic is today, bringing it to kids and adults in a new way. So I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to just kind of go to my PowerPoint presentation. So I'll share my screen with you. So I'm going to tell you the story of how I got to this project, because I do have a different kind of background. So I've always been interested from a child in the natural world and preserving it. And so these are some of the books that I have done, and I want to kind of highlight these bottom two with Julie Dunlap, and she is someone, a dear friend, and we've worked on Leopold adventures together and children's books works together. And so I was fortunate enough to be asked by her to co-author with her these bottom two on John Muir and Louisa May. She's a great historian herself. Maybe she'll talk to you sometime. But these are some of the other ones. This one had Planet Patrol had begun as 3 books, earlier versions that were published: Earthwise at Home, Earthwise at Play, Earthwise at School. And I served as both a children's book editor and a children's writer at this time. So I was inspired to work on Aldo Leopold because the fabulous biography of Kurt Miney, who is a very close friend. So he was a friend of my husband's. When I married my husband, he came with packages as a good friend, and we've gone on canoe trips and stuff. And I read his book and was so amazed. So go to his book. It's wonderful. But I said to him, Kurt, you have to write a kid's book. They have to know about Aldo. And he said, that's not my thing. And so I worked on research, and I ended up writing this first one, Of Things Natural, Wild, and Free. And I got in so much research and talked to Nina, his daughter, and did all this firsthand research. I really felt there had to be a layperson's biography that's a little shorter with photos. I always like photos. So that's how we got Aldo Leopold, A Fierce Green Fire. And then this is an Oxford edition where I added Aldo Leopold. People kept calling it A Fierce Green Fire, but the actual title was Aldo Leopold, A Fierce Green Fire, and nobody found it. So it became A Fierce Green Fighter, Aldo Leopold's Life and Legacy. And in the new edition, I have added his legacy in terms of what happened with his ideas, just a short synopsis. And I didn't even do enough on the land ethic because everybody seems to know it. But wilderness concept, his farmers as conservationists, all those things, his children, what they did, his students, what they did. So there's a whole extra third of the book now that talks about the ripple effects of one incredible man who was interdisciplinary and worked with great people, great ideas, and applied them. So, I also got to work, I was asked to do this book on Seth Eastman, who was at Fort Snelling as a painter. And then, they asked me to do a biography of Charles Eastman, his grandson, who was the first Native American physician. He was the first Dakota physician. He was the first Indigenous person to graduate from Boston Medical School. And he began as a traditional young man before the kind of massacres and conflict in Minnesota. And he ended up talking to 6 presidents, starting the American Society. He was of American Indians, advocating for Indian rights. He wrote all these books. He wrote 11 different books, very popular. He influenced the Boy Scouts to bring in Native American and woodscraft. So he was very influential, and the journey into his spirituality and his ethic also influenced me. And then I was asked to do a book on John Paul II's writings on ecology. So I had that other level, which got me into starting with other people, this group called Interfaith Oceans, to get people of faith to care about the oceans and think about their own ethic of caring for the earth through scripture. So I have a book in process on that I haven't finished, which then led me to someone asked me to do a book on Larry Gibson, who helped move the anti-mountaintop removal coal mining momentum and movement in Appalachia, but specifically West Virginia. So I've done over 100 interviews with people from West Virginia. So I needed something lighter. Someone had asked me to do a children's book on Paul Bunyan, and I said, I'm going to do just the typical Paul Bunyan, because really it goes against my ethic of just indiscriminate forestry. And so a while back, then I wrote, and I come from Minnesota and Wisconsin. I live in Wisconsin right now on the border of the St. Croix River Valley, which is Wisconsin to Minnesota. But I grew up in in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and we would go to northern Minnesota all the time. Paul Bunyan actually spoke to me and said, "Hello, Marybeth." Spoke to my husband. Every little kid in Minnesota seemed to go see Paul Bunyan. And then there was Lucette for Hackensack. So I wrote this book, Paul Bunyan's Sweetheart, based on Lucette from Hackensack, Minnesota, transforming the heart of Paul Bunyan and his ethic and the lumberjacks through 3 love tests, which all the answers for the 3 love tests are the trees. So here's just some scenes. I wanted to diversify the history view, that is not just whites and lumberjacks and everything else. So I wanted to bring in the history of the smallpox and some of the things. So I had to have a reason how she became a giant. So her village was wiped out by smallpox, and she was found and raised by the bears. And her immune system, instead of it killing her, the disease, it went into overdrive and she became a giant. That's the backstory before the thing begins. And she has this this cow that was hit by lightning, and instead of it its response was to grow bigger. So that Nell's milk becomes, this river of milk that she churns into butter and cream, so that Wisconsin, Minnesota become the dairy states. She quilts up these farm fields, and everyone comes to love her because she helps the land. And when she does, shakes out her rugs and stuff, it's like air conditioning, unless she does it too vigorous, and then she creates Tornado Alley. So these are her claims to being tall tale. And here's her response when Paul shows up and steals her candy. And her candy is a mix of maple syrup and raspberry jams that, when they harden, become Lake Superior agates. So she also helped create the agates, because you always have to have the origin stories in a tall tale. But in the end, she puts him through the 3 love tests, and he learns to clean up after himself and leave the land as healthy as he found it. And she spends her days in Hackensack, strolling through forest fairyland, swimming in sparkling lakes, and smelling those piney fresh woods. So the thing is not that you can't ever cut trees, but you do it carefully. You know, you leave around streams, you leave elders, the seniors, you use good forest practice and diversity and replant. So doing these heavier projects, I'd always had a vision of trying to turn Paul Bunyan's Sweetheart into a musical, because I just somehow always saw it as a musical. So I was fortunate enough to talk to the St. Croix Valley Foundation, and I'm in the St. Croix River Valley. And they had a music education grant and they had a Valley Arts grant. So the first grant was the music education grant. And then after that would come the deadline for the Valley Arts grant. And Art Reach St. Croix, I have to honor all these people. They've been, you know, they served as our fiscal agent to try this project. So Jamie Paulbicki, this new choir director at Hudson High School, which is, I'm in Hudson, Wisconsin, she designed a program where this young man, Owen Olson, he was a junior at the time we started this project, he became the composer. He's incredibly talented. You will hear his name in years to come. He's really an amazing young man. So she designed this program to go with this musical grant where we would come in, talk about forest history, talk about the St. Croix Valley in its role in forest history. And we would take the first three songs, the Lumberjack song, the Animal song, and the first meeting between Paul and Lucette, which is the duet. And the choirs and two seniors would sing these songs. And after we had the Spring Pops concert and they had performed them, they would also do some composing of some of the chords and transition ideas for the background music between the scenes. So they got a chance to compose too. So it was a really multi-level learning experience for everyone. So that happened this last fall into the students worked on this and they performed it. Here you can see them performing at our freshman men choir, performing at the Spring Pops concert in March. And we wrote the second grant to get a stage testing. So this is a little of what we presented is we're part of the St. Croix River Valley, which is a National Scenic Riverway, which is preserved because of its incredible scenic beauty. And it has to be reaffirmed every 20 years and recertified. And you have to go through community processes to do that and to check the guidelines and how are they being applied and where do they need to be adjusted, and where are people breaking rules, that kind of thing, to keep it preserved. And I was a citizen who volunteered to be part of that Scenic Riverway recertification. And right across from my town on the Scenic Riverway is Stillwater, Minnesota. And every year they have Lumberjack Days. And in our community and in Stillwater, there are actual international championship log rollers, and you'll see them practice, and some women. And so it's really exciting. I talked to one of these women log rollers. So all these things were kind of in the back of my mind when I'm trying to present. So here are just what some of my goals were to transform the cultural icon, Paul Bunyan, that myth of unlimited logging for commerce and industry, where you have trees as a commodity, to one of forest care with trees and people as part of a natural community. And you can, hear the ethic of Aldo and of the indigenous communities and things in that. To diversify the understanding of history with indigenous people of North America and the immigrants of varied ethnic backgrounds to be included in the logging history. and to differentiate for audience members the goals of loggers from the goals of logging companies, and to break down the myth of either or, loggers against the protectors or loggers against the environment. I want to break those down, either or. So, I took a class in transforming something from the book to the stage. And here are some of my characters. You can see, and when we went to present to the choral group, you know, we just gave them some visions of logging so they could see the immigrants, they could see the diversity here, Black loggers, you know, and you can see that the faces, they're varied, and I wanted that diversity. We also went to the Native American Student Alliance to ask them what they thought about this thing and what cultural elements should we be concerned about in presenting and not presenting, and in our music. Like, you don't use the sacred flute, you don't use the sacred drumming, that those have a life of their own and need to be, you know, there's very careful rules around how you use them. So they advised us that we could intimate the native flute, and we can intimate the drumming in a respectful way, but not use their actual instruments and weave it in a certain way. So they were so helpful. They asked for a land acknowledgement at the beginning, and which was a wonderful thing. So Lucette begins the play with a land acknowledgement. And my vision for this musical is that every community, every production company that presents it considers their local history and the indigenous people who live there, and that the acknowledgement changes based on place, and that we acknowledge that they're still here. You know, we don't want to think that indigenous people in our community are just in the past. They aren't. They're alive and well and wonderful and contributing. And they're part of our mix of America and American history and current movements, like the Honor the Earth group in Minnesota is amazing, doing such great work, and throughout the world. The Indigenous Women's Network is doing amazing things for forest history and conservation. So is the Indigenous Peoples Networks, and nationally, internationally, everywhere you go, they're on the forefront of current conservation and obviously forest history and land history. So we so appreciated their generosity to talk with us and be willing to help us on this project, and they added a lot. So here's Owen again and myself. We had to raise funds for the matching funds for this project. So the high school kids have been so into it. They're so fun. And I was going to give you a little bit of snippets from these presentations we've had, so you could get a feel for the music. The Lumberjacks are singing Chop, Split, Build. We're building a nation. We're building a foundation. Then you get the animals. Their whole response is got to get out of here. So their homeland with Lucette is being destroyed. So they're out of here. So these are just some of the high school students. And you know, you can have a snippet of that song, and then you have Paul and Lucette. This is from the stage presentation at the spring concert, where they're singing, and he's like, haven't you heard the tall tales of Paul Bunyan? And she said, we, very bad for me. And she is just upset with him. And she does not want to have anything to do with him. And he wins her over enough, and her girlfriends convince her that she should give this guy a chance to, at least, she wants, in a sense, to teach him. So she puts him through these 3 love tests. We were fortunate enough to talk to Kathy Welch, Dr. Kathy Welch at the University of Wisconsin, River Falls, where I teach. She's another adjunct professor. She loved the idea of having a strong environmental aspect to the play, Americana, strong, female lead, not pitting people against each other, but trying to move everyone forward. She liked it. She signed on. So we will be doing this summer stage testing from July 5th to August 5th. So if any of you are around, come to the performances on August 3rd and 4th of this summer at the Davis Auditorium. The University of Wisconsin River Falls got really excited, and they are for free offering the venue of Davis Auditorium for these workshops and performances with a morning matinee on August 5th. So, but then Kathy had a bigger dream. She wanted to take it to Edinburgh. So we went to the university, and they have approved it for a travel abroad experience. It'll be a 2-course class where I'll be teaching intro to stage and musical writing of script and lyrics, because I'm also the lyrics person on the songs. Who knew I was going to be a songwriter? And how to work in collaboration and the beauties of collaboration and a musical, how it can hit and touch people on different levels and engage them. So she thought this is the perfect play to take it, and the university is behind it. So we're going to offer it to students, and it will be first to University of Wisconsin River Falls students. Then it'll be opened up to any students who want to take it as a transfer credit and come with us. And then if there's still room, then community theater members who would like to go through this experience. So it's an adventure. Just to give background, I will be teaching the initial course online, so nobody has to move to River Falls for it. Then there will be a weekend of auditions and introductions and getting people as a troupe to be ready. And then August 5th through 15th, we're in Scotland of 2024. And then you say, well, then what's next for Lucette? Which I say too. Well, Owen Olson, the composer, has been accepted into the Boston Conservatory of Music at Berkeley. And they only accept 12 individuals in the nation into their composing program, because they really help each student take their creative works and bring them to the next level. And they've been known to bring new works to this Goodspeed Musicals New Music Fest. So we're hoping maybe in 2025 or 2026, we could take that the Boston Conservatory of Music and Theater and things would do a college professional, not professional, but a college presentation at the Goodspeed Musical Fest in East Haddam, Connecticut, because that's how Come From Away, this new musical, that's what happened. Is the Boston Conservatory of Music did a production at this festival, and production companies come and they say, I want to sign on to that. So maybe, we're hoping. And you may ask, well, what are some of the Leopoldian ethics that do it? And I love this line: we abuse land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect. And that's the end of the book, and it's the end of the play. And also the question whether a still higher standard of living is worth its cost in things natural, wealth. So that's it for my presentation of my journey to how I'm here. And I'm in the midst of this adventure. All of it is an adventure for me. And it's an exciting one. So now you're part of it. So I will stop the share on this, and questions or comments. Oh, and just so you know, Jamie's going to put links in the follow through so you can get snippets of doing hearing it. And I'll ask him if he wouldn't mind putting in the QR and things on. If anybody wants to contribute to this project, you are most welcome to. I want you to first do your forest history contribution. Don't do me first. But if you have a little extra and you want to go to the arts, we'll send you that link as well if you want it. So.
Great. Yes, absolutely. Marybeth, thank you for endorsing us. Happy to have given you the opportunity to not only, of course, share about the musical, but the opportunity to support what really amounts to forest history education initiative that is quite unique.
I would say so. I just believe, and the reason I got into children's books to begin with is not only because children are the next generation, that's obvious. But they transform their parents and grandparents and their aunts and uncles in their passions. And so the more we can reach out and include them in conversations, which is why I just love that I have high schoolers working, their energy is so amazing. And Owen, I don't know that I could have ever worked with a composer this open. Like I had to say, okay, you got to have folk music. Have you seen Seven Brides for Seven Brothers and their dance scene? So he shared his musical traditions with me, and I shared my musical traditions with him to have this really amazing collaboration as we've been moving forward on these things. And his vision and his energy, he's going to bring in people. And this musical, in my hopes are, will bring people into really considering things in a different way than they ever have and get past some of this divisiveness.
Mm-hmm. And so Owen is the young man who's been accepted to Boston Conservatory. And that's a remarkable story there. Just this incredible talent is there in your backyard. I'm curious. So of course, the musical Hamilton comes to mind, which not because it's history based, but it uses many different musical genres. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know if Owen is and you are staying with one particular style of music throughout, or if you're bringing in 21st century musical styles as well. So it has this broader appeal.
Well, that's a very good question, because here's a fun thing. Here's a little story. So Owen, the reason I was introduced to Owen is he was the boyfriend of a friend of mine's daughter, a great close friend. So that was how I met him. Mm-hmm. And the first meeting we had is that you spent 2.5 hours going over musical styles that we want to do. Like I said, okay, if you have an Irish immigrant, they're going to have a little bit different, jig or whatever. So mm-hmm. As the first song, Chop Split Build, there's a Polish immigrant. He does a little stanza. His music sounds a little different. Then you get to the French one, it's more musette. And then you get, so each as the different, all within this Chop Split Build thing. But the first version he did of this was a blues version, okay? In a bluesy swing. And I'm like, Owen, love it. I mean, we were running around the house singing it, but I said, we got to get bluegrass and more traditional music to start it off. So how about this? Save that version. And once people are in this world, we're going to have some humor by you bringing that version in at the dance scene when they're kind of in a tete-a-tete with the townsfolk men for the women, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers in the back of my mind. So you bring the blues version in and it'll bring laughs and this contemporary feel. So that will come in different things. And our goal, coming from a more Peter and the Wolf musical tradition, where you have a different instrument kind of represent different characters, mm-hmm. You'll see that when Paul comes with there's a trombone or a bugle, not bugle, trumpet. That is his brass. He's just this big brass guy, and he's always so vain and whatever, bombastic till the end. And then Lucette, she has the flute, like the native flute, and drumming that often are woven into her songs. And so it's a different kind of musical than I've seen ever out there. The closest thing I've seen is Come From Away, where they're using, the Newfoundland kind of Gaelic inspired music in their bar scene. And when I teach this, I'm going to use Come From Away. So for those who don't know what Come From Away is, it's a new musical, fairly recent, and it's based on history, which is another reason I like it, and interviews of survivors of 9/11 who the planes were redirected. The ones when they stopped the airspace, they were redirected to Newfoundland, Gander, and this small town and its little adjoining communities had these numerous planes coming to the small, what was the international airport and had been kind of not closed down, but close to. Suddenly this influx of planes and influx of people and the generosity and hospitality of these people and the obstacles to try and embrace them. So that new musical, which you can see for, on Apple TV, just get a trial version and you can see it. It uses very versatile staging, and it has folk music as part of the music, and contemporary, and it also uses sound well, and it uses staging very simple with just chairs. So it's a really good model for when we take it to Edinburgh, is we are not going to have a lot of staging. We are going to have multiple characters playing different things. So we aren't in a rap style, although some of the characters, but Owen, that's the kind of music he knows now. And he's integrating mine. So it's a mix, and it's got 10 original songs, and then these medleys that end up with 17 different musical things. And I always feel really comfortable because, we're new in this. This is my first musical. This is his first musical. It will go through vetting through the Boston Conservatory of Music professors and people who know this more. So, but I just we've got a great start because those young people, we just had so much fun and people were clapping, and I mean, the audience, and that's another thing for this musical that I want different than a lot of musicals. I want audience interaction. I do not want people sitting there just watching. I want people clapping. I want people answering Paul when he looks at the audience and goes, what am I supposed to do? So there's a lot of talking to the audience and you betchas and everything else. So.
Oh, that sounds fairly innovative in terms of breaking the fourth wall from the stage.
And it's not so innovative like I created it.
Right.
I went to, when I was in England, I was a student there, and I went to their pantos at Christmas time, and they are interacting with the audience all the time. And I'm always like, why don't we do that more? And when I went to a Shakespeare, they're running up and down talking to the audience all the time. I'm like, hey, that's the kind of theater I want. So I'm not for stuffy theater where we're away from the crowd. I want the crowd as part of the performance.
Okay.
As much as we can keep the ruly crowds at bay, so.
But I think the interaction with audience, or audience participation, if you will, does at least date to Shakespeare, if not predates. But so it sounds like you're borrowing from the English music hall tradition in that way.
Yeah, I'm a raven. I borrow from anyone.
Well, there is the joke about historians. We're not necessarily coming up with new ideas. We're a bit like, or magpies.
Crows, magpies, my favorite birds other than the meadowlark is the magpie.
Okay.
So I have magpie all over because I just think it's the most beautiful, intelligent, wonderful, fabulous bird. And so
There's it, yeah, and as historians, as long as we cite the the origin, we're good. Otherwise, it is stealing.
oh, I don't like to steal.
Right. That's why we have citations.
But in a musical work, everything, I mean, Shakespeare was borrowing and modifying. I mean, we're working from the stuff of life and the stuff that we know, and we're creatively adapting. And so, yeah, I'll say right away, I love Seven Brides for Seven Brothers dance scene. If we could do anything like that, I'm fine. Or if we do if it evokes something, great.
Yeah.
As long as I'm not stealing from them.
Right. Just a reminder to folks that if you want to ask a question, please do so through the Q&A forum. So I've been listening to you, and I want to remind folks that, Lucette, the musical, started as Lucette, the children's book. And this is...
Wait, just 1 second. I don't want to be mean and correct you, but it started out as Paul Bunyan's Sweetheart. That's what the original book was. Which is out of print now, but I hope to bring it back in print as Lucette, as you say. So I do want to bring it back.
Right. So for those of you looking in used bookshops and used book websites, it is Paul Bunyan's Sweetheart. But yeah, that would be great to see it come back out with a new title. But then, just a little, yes, it should be back in circulation because it is a wonderful, wonderful story, which you've done. And then the artwork is these beautiful watercolors, I think, is the medium in which she worked.
I don't know if I don't think they're watercolors. They might be pastels or oils, or acrylics. But Renee Grafe, which she is so generous to let us use her artwork, and I'm hoping to bring it back with that. And it's a style that people are doing faster, just lighter things. And hers is so beautifully textured and wonderful. She's from Wisconsin too. And she would do American Girl history things. And so she's a fabulous illustrator, and I put a plug out for her for, I want her to get more children's books. But and I do have to make some disclaimers about that version and the new version. Anytime you bring up a work that's a picture book to the stage, it has to have much more to it or it flops. I've seen a lot of flopped children's books because they go straight. They don't add subplots and new characters and texture, and so it's too flat. And I didn't want that to happen. So it isn't, it's not going to run exactly the same because there's new characters and there's more things going on, like different ethnics, variety of the lumberjacks. That's not in the picture book or anything. Right. They're just lumberjacks. And the other thing is, and I didn't mean to do this, but some of the tests, some of the things Paul Bunyan does because he's clueless, if anybody imitated, would be animal cruelty, because he plucks some feathers and he does this. And in the original picture book, it was ridiculous. So it wasn't like you would do it. But I don't even want to imply that anyone would try it, even if it's to show how clueless this man is. So in the revision, just like there's a few words where it would be they're molted feathers, they're not plucking them, and they're not naked birds anymore. And yeah, I think that was the only one. But the reviewers are like, oh my God, what's she implying? And I'm like, I'm not implying doing it, but I don't even want to even hint that I would. I'm not for animal cruelty in any sense. Paul was clueless. he's not even going to be that clueless in either the musical or in the revision of the book. So
one of the the Paul Bunyan Sweetheart is not your first children's book. And I think there's a belief among the general populace that writing and getting a children's book published, oh, that looks easy. I've got an idea. That, I should be able to pitch that, get it snapped up right away. Could you talk a little bit about some of the challenges of children's publishing? And then if you want to start with the challenge of actually writing for that audience, and then we can talk about publishing separately.
Well, I think the best children's books are poetry, and well done poetry. And I don't mean sing-songy, rhymey poetry. I mean lyrical, that there's a rhythm, because every children's book has to be able to be read out dramatically and beautifully. And it's got to have, it's very much what I'm finding on the stage. It has to have beats, like where each line lyrically will end, and for emphasis, and it has to be condensed, a good idea condensed to a drama with an arc, and characterization with few words. Never talk down to a kid, never talk down to a kid. And that's hard, to treat them as the wonderful, thinking, curious individuals they are at every level. So it should read well for an adult as well as for a kid. So it's got to have rhythm and characterization and plot, like any good story, like any good stage presentation, like any good movie. And all within 32 pages or however many pages you get. And has to be also readable on for the different reading levels. So it's a complex art that is not just about an idea, it's about carry through. It's just like when someone says, I've got a great idea for a novel, Marybeth, do you want to write it? And I'm like, no, I really don't. Do you have any idea what goes into a novel? Do you have any idea what goes into these? It's not the idea, it's the idea and carry through. And it's a long process. And the other thing that's the two things is that as a children's book editor, and as any editor, I've been editor on numerous things, you could tell the people who worked in a writer's group and got vetted and got some feedback and knew how to take feedback from those who just had an idea and they wrote something down. There's a very big difference, is you have to be used to rejection. You have to be used to wanting to improve things and looking at feedback as a gift. You may not take it all, but hearing from your audience, or any audience, gives you clues about how you come off that you won't know. So as an editor, you would seek out those who you felt you could work with because they want to improve their work and they want feedback. And yet they are strong enough in what they believe that they can also say, that won't work, but how about this? Or no, I have to hold the line here. So that's a difficult thing. The other thing is the book business has changed radically, and it's very difficult. So it was difficult when I broke in, and I broke in because I was rewriting everybody's works as an editor. And I thought, well, I could do this, and I could. But I didn't have the confidence until I had everybody else that I had to rework to make it work, that I thought, if I have to rework everybody's, then how about I'll do it. And but at that time, which was years and years ago, decades, the children's book industry was still run by editors making choices of good books. Then it went through kind of the 80s or the late 90s, where book companies kept getting purchased as either investments or as marketing things, and they were conglomeratizing and everything. And then it started moving to celebrity publishing. Okay, Madonna, Fergie, everything, anybody. So it was a name so they could sell it. So that quality was not the major issue. It was name status. And most people in the children's book industry might hit mid-level. You're not going to be. And there were a lot of movements at that time for young authors groups to help people care about reading. And so you could write a book and it may not make millions or be known, but it could win awards, and you would then, that happened. But then you would be invited to speak to young authors, so they would know how to write. Well, then the book business changed some more into ebooks, and then it went into self-publishing, which made it much more difficult and there were library publishers. So you have different markets that you're writing for and different rules from the legislature about testing on reading and everything. And so it changed so that only certain words can be used. Like, how do they learn new words? And they were teaching by worksheet instead of books. And there just things that I'm not very happy about. Mm-hmm. And then it moved to all the self-publishing, so that publishers really were and are struggling to make their own niche and continue to put some quality books out there and be seen. And so it's a very difficult forest of diverse options in publishing, both which open things up for people to do self-publishing and then get a following and then make a pitch to a bigger publisher because you've proven people want this. So that's really what it is. It used to be when you'd work at if you got accepted by a publisher, they would have a proofer, a copy editor, a director, a creative designer, everything. It would go through all these stages. Now they're expecting pretty much that people have paid for that, all those services themselves, and it'll be a quick run through. And that's a difference. And so that the person who's writing has to be a marketer, a social media expert, have a website, have a platform, have all the vetting of copy editing, and yet still not necessarily have an illustrator, because the publisher wants to be able to choose the illustrator to go with the project, unless you're an artist illustrator, writer illustrator, that's a different situation. But otherwise, they choose it and you work with it. So I have funny stories about how that's worked, and different. Yeah. Julie Dunlap will tell you some funny ones with me. But anyway, so it's a different thing. So to get out there, I don't want to discourage anyone, but it's very difficult. It's a very, very difficult market to be in and to try, which is why, I have a lot of books out of print and I don't know how to get them back in print, or how, even I have 19 unpublished manuscripts that I know are good. Mm-hmm. Where do I fit? I don't know. Yeah. Where do I belong? Which is one of the songs in my play, is Where Do I Belong? She keeps singing, and I can sing that many times and have. Where do I belong? And I don't have answers for people. I just have the journey. As Rilke had said to a young artist, love the questions, and someday you'll live into the answers. That's my motto.
Well, speaking of questions, Steve Schmidt weighs in and he says, maybe I missed this. He's asking about the availability of the book. Again, it's out of print, so you're going to
very difficult to find, but I do hope to get it back in print. I will try, but then it'll be as Lucette.
He also says, I hope this musical can be adapted for children's theater. He's throwing, and he says, my daughter participates in Central Wisconsin Children's Theater. So Steve has a particular interest in this, but can you talk about?
Yes, because that's the next step.
What you're doing, and is that I'm not sure about the difference between what you're doing in children's theater.
And that's a great question, because we are doing that almost as we speak. Because if you think of the musical Annie, Annie has the big production, and there's many, many different versions that you can use for different stage adaptations and time limits. So to go to our travel abroad next year, the director, Kathy Welch, she's amazing. Has had this international experience in Japan, in Kabuki theater, and then she had her own Green Tea Players, and she's the co-owner and co-founder of Old Gem Theater in New Richmond, Wisconsin, which features, as you know, half of its offerings children's theater. So she does adaptations all the time. So she's like, oh, Marybeth, I'll help you with the adaptation. So she's going to kind of be the writer of the adaptation with me for next year's travel abroad. So we will have a version after next year
For children's theater.
You bet. We will have the full musical, and we will have the children's version. So yes, we've always been thinking we need a children's version.
Oh, wow. I mean,
and the children's book to go with it. So, you know, do I bite off small things? I guess not. So I have a lot on my list of, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this. And I just have to tell you really quick, I have been on so many projects, which has been Sisyphus pushing it up, you know, the hill, and then it rolls back on you all my life. And some make it over the hill. You know, I've got a bunch of children's book who made it over the hill, different projects, but this one, the universe is loving it, because first of all, it was just for play that I took this script playing class, because I'm an empty nester suddenly, and my kids are gone, and my husband had a work thing. So I'm like, I got to do something. So I just thought, okay, I'll do this. And then I'm like, Thanksgiving, I'm talking to a friend going, yeah, so what? I got this script, but what good is it going to do? I don't have a composer. Who would ever do this? Because I can't pay him. I have no money. She goes like, yeah, who would we know? Who would we know? I'm like, okay, what's the joke? She goes, Evie's boyfriend. And Owen is now known as more than Evie's boyfriend, believe me. But so we text at Thanksgiving, and he's like, sure, love to. Like, okay. But every step of the way, it's been like those children's books where you go, oh, Owl, we really need this. And Owl goes, well, I can't help you, but go talk to Badger. And then you go talk to Badger. Badger goes, oh, I can't help you, but go talk to so-and-so. And all along the way, they're kind of following behind your footsteps. People have been like the woman who interviewed me for this project. She goes, and she's a young woman, a journalist for the community paper. And she's, can I ask you a question first? I'm like, sure. She goes, are you the author of Paul Bunyan's Sweetheart? I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what it's based on. She goes, I love that children's book. That was my favorite children's book. Do you need any help? I can do social media, you know, and everything else. And then we go, you know, to my friend who's done costumes for the local children's theater. She goes, do you have costumes? I can do costumes. And I just are going, I want to be part of this. And that's what the high schoolers are like. I want to be part of this. So I just started this as play with a purpose, play with purpose, but I didn't have any vision it would ever get to this stage or get this here that fast. Like when we walked out, we had one meeting with the vice chancellor, and we thought they're going to tell me it'll take years to consider going to travel abroad. He's like, okay, so how are we going to do it? Like, you have these forms to fill out in the month. So can you get these forms filled out? And Kathy and I walked out and said, did you hear what I heard? She was like, yeah, I think we're going to Edinburgh next year. Who knew? Who knew? So I think there's some times you just hit a project that is a community project where people find their own dreams in it. there's something magical about people wanting to be part of this because it fits one of their dreams.
Mhm.
It's,
Well, and I think that the key word there is community, right? So one of the themes that I've picked up on through everything you've done, all your work, is that of community. And the Leopold quote you had up towards the end there, that if it's a commodity, in a way that separates it from the community, but if it's part of this bigger community, I love that you've stumbled into a community you didn't know existed. To speak musically, it's as if you're Gene Kelly and Van Johnson, and you've just stumbled into Brigadoon.
well, a little bit. And the thing is, as a kid, I loved musicals. And I'd audition and always fail because I get so nervous I choke. So I said to my husband, I had to write my own musical to get in it. So, and so I've been taking choir again because I love music so much. And so I'm like doing choir at night. And so I probably will have to play a part when we go to Edinburgh because we may not have enough parts. And same with the stage testing this summer. I'll probably be Mama Bear, the old lady, which is fine, So anyway.
Yeah. I did want to ask you, you mentioned in your presentation the communication and the work you've done with the local indigenous populations around the musical. And so I wanted to give you the opportunity to elaborate on that, especially because I was intrigued that you were working with, I think it was a high school aged group. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So when I worked on my book, which is not published yet, Beyond Wounded Knee of Ohia's Dr. Charles Eastman, I worked at that time with the Dakota historian who talked me into doing it initially, and it just became too long a project. But and he was a family member from the Dakota people in the Flandreau area of South Dakota, and so he was the grandnephew, and then the niece, who was great grandnephew or great grandniece, and Eastman's granddaughter, but she was more from the Boston white community, and these were from the indigenous community. So I worked a long time and did a lot of study on the spirituality, on the background, on what Charles, everything. So I had come from that background and knew I wanted to be really respectful and do this. And but I kind of wanted to do it not from elders, but from youth. What are they valuing? What are they seeing? And in case they wanted to be part of the project. So I had contacted the Native American Student Alliance or Association, can't remember, NASA, at Stillwater, and they were so gracious and so honest and worried that we were going to Disneyfy everything. And like you're not going to have talking animals, are you? And everything. Like, yeah, I kind of am. But that's not because she's Native as much as because she's living with the animals, which is part of being Native, how she got there. But they're like, oh, okay, well, maybe that's okay. And they were very cautious about everything, but so gracious, so kind, so insightful, so fun. I really, and Owen, went with me, and he got musical questions, and they're like, keep us posted and everything else. And then they said, what we would like, could you try and connect the Native students in your high school with us? Because they're working with their middle schoolers. They're doing like tanning of deer. They're doing beading. They're doing learning the language. So I had some language tapes from the Dakota people that I gave up. I couldn't learn Dakota. So I gave them because they didn't have those kinds of resources. They had Anishinaabe, and Ojibwe resources. So I was able to at least pass something on that was of value. And then I think we're connecting the university with their group. so that maybe there could be more university conversation. So it's also created this kind of community, maybe connections through the university. So, I mean, those are my goals. Anytime we meet someone, what do they need and want? How can they be part of the community? How can this have positive effects? And so, I don't know, does that answer? Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, thank you so much for your time and your presentation and really your energy too, because your enthusiasm just really comes through the screen. And congratulations on getting the project this far. That's amazing. And best of luck this summer and next.
Yeah, 2.5 weeks we start. Like, oh boy. Are you kidding? I'm like, so we're finalizing the script. We're finalizing the lyrics for this stage. You know, we know it's going to change. And Owen is working so hard. You know, he's like, you know, because he's got to score it all. And he has all these levels of violin, what the violin's doing, what the like the horns are doing, what, you know, so he's not doing it just like melody. He's got the harmonies, it's so full. And I hope when you hear some of these clips, when we did the choral version, you hear mostly the piano, beautiful piano. But when you hear the version where we did it in the Hop and Barrel Brewery, we had a horn player, we had a bass player, we had a drum, and we had a flute player in addition to his keyboard. And then they did, after we did the formal singing presentations in between, because we had a few sets, they did jazz versions of these things in riffs and spontaneity. You know, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. And the students were just into it. And so to see what these young musicians, I just have to say one other thing we decided. So for a workshop, you usually have to pay to be part of it. And then we were like, well, we want musicians. And we were going to pay the musicians. And then like Kathy's like, but they're all working artists and they're all contributing to the development of this. So we decided that after expenses, if we can raise enough money so there's not too many expenses, that we're just going to split the ticket things, and all the actors and musicians get a cut. They may get $10, they may get $5, they may get $20, you know, whatever. But we wanted to honor them with their first gig as working artists. So they're not going to be paying for this experience. They're going to be hopefully getting a little something. So that's why the fundraising to take care of some of the costs of lighting and staging and everything else, even though it's a simple performance, that, you know, that we want to get all the costs out of the way so that they can split the tickets, goodwill offerings from the ticket people. So
always cover the gas money.
Something, but just the honoring of that, your expertise is being honored, just like everybody else. And so I say, if anyone's in the area, again, Davis Auditorium, August 3rd, 4th, and 5th. The fun thing is, it's my birthday on the 3rd. And it's when I'm 64. Like, who knew what you're going to do at 64? And here there's plays is like doing its premiere. So I think, and I've had to learn more new skills in the last year and a half. That, I mean, I've been on this upward climb, and still, because I have to do online certification to teach this course next year. I'm telling you, but learning at this age is great too. So new skills, new people, new networking, new community.
Awesome. Well, thanks again.
Thank you. It's just an honor, and everybody give to the Forest Society, you know, and History Society, because we need to learn from history and pass it on. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for being a practitioner of history as well.
Oh, thanks. Thanks.